Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Operator Syndrome. I'm Patrick. This is Steve. We're going to continue our discussion about the book Code Over Country by Matthew Cole, I believe is his name. Matthew Cole, there's the book right there. We're going to continue that conversation here in this episode. So, a question that Steve had asked me last time, and we hadn't got quite to really answering it. So, we're going to pick up right there, which was how the Rangers perceive the SEALs, sort of culturally in general. And, from my perspective, I think I had mentioned how I hadn't worked with them too much. I definitely the numbered SEAL teams, I'd spent essentially no time with them, only the dev group guys. But in general, you know, the impression from the Ranger perspective was that the SEALs were, I don't want to say undisciplined cowboys, because that's kind of how they come off in books and how other people might describe them. But they definitely approached their jobs differently. Um, SEALs will always talk about how how they go to army schools. In fact, Steve, I think you have you have a story about how when you went to I believe it was SOTIC, how you all
Hmm.
sign in and show up, kind
Yeah.
of more casually dressed
Yeah.
than the army dudes who'd come in, in their uniforms and have everything cleaned up. So in general, I feel like the SEAL teams are more relaxed, definitely in their grooming standards, and I think that's a small thing, but I think that reflects kind of how people perceive the teams to operate in general, just sort of relaxed, less focused on the details, and and to be blunt and perhaps harsh. I think in general that perspective uh, continues on to where folks think that maybe they are undisciplined and
Hmm.
and how they do their jobs. They're maybe a little more focused on how they are perceived than the results of their work. I wouldn't go so far as having been the person to just say that. I wouldn't go that far, um, but you know, definitely, definitely, I think that's sort of the overarching interpretation. Now, I can understand. I think that the SEAL teams are a very unique group within the Navy, and I think that there are parts of the Navy that are way more regimented. And I'm thinking like shipboard life, perhaps being in like an air wing or something like that, where the details matter. So I don't think it's a Navy thing, although folks maybe like to joke, inter-service rivalries. I think it's part of the SEALs standing out, letting the rest of their service know that they are different and that they are special. Um, and how that translates into operational effectiveness or not, I think that's where this book tries to pick up. Um, s- s- so that's maybe the third party's perspective. Steve, do you? How much of that rings true to you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It's how do I kind of wrap my perspective around it? I definitely see that. I saw that from day one, I guess. Well, when I went to Buds, I was assigned a temporary duty. This happens often when you're in a class, when you're waiting for a class to get all the people built up. They're going to assign you to do something in the meantime. And they cut us loose. They cut myself and about three others who were waiting on. We started in class 149, Bud's class 149. And they sent us over to SEAL Team 5. And we were pre-trainees at the time. We weren't even trainees. And that gave us, and we did was just crap details around the team that nobody else wanted to do, and we were more than glad to do it. We were around our heroes. These were like gods walking among us, and we just kept our head down. And but we started to pick up on sort of the team ethos, if you will. A lot of joking around, a lot of what do you call it, just sort of making fun of Big Navy, making
Hmm.
fun of the system that we all just had disdain for because we were, like you say, special in some regards. There and one thing too, there's a little bit of, as is always the case, there's not only um, rivalries between different branches, there's rivalries within the SEAL team. So you've got East Coast, West Coast rivalries.
Mm-hmm.
So there was always this thing where, oh, the East Coast teams, regular SEAL teams we're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
were looked at as more serious. It was harder. They had suckier weather. I mean, some of those things are true.
Right.
We're in San Diego. I mean, my God, Coronado Island is where millionaires live. I mean, I think Bill Clinton had a place on San Clemente, Coronado Island is like a resort that he got away to. It's a paradise, which is, it gets into a whole nother ironic like thing that, you know, hell on earth is there, and then this gorgeous Hotel del Coronado and all those movie stars are there. So it's
Right.
weird. It's a weird place. But yeah, we I think there was kind of built into us, and a lot of this honestly I think comes out of Vietnam. And that was our roots really, as an institution. We cut our teeth in Vietnam. I mean, I wasn't there, but I'm saying we as a unit. And Mike, one of my, I'll refer to Mike probably a lot throughout this podcast. Mike Bailey, retired Master Chief, Vietnam operator who I was in platoon with. And I asked him, I said, man, how did you guys have such success? And they did have a lot of success in Vietnam. I mean, compared to, you know, munitions captured, places liberated, low casualty rate compared to other units, they did really a lot with not very much. And he said that, well, we figured out ways to skirt around the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this wasn't, some of this I don't look at as direct cutting corners necessarily in an immoral way. For example, every unit post-op, and this stuff still continues to this day, they had to fill out what's called a UNIDIR form unless otherwise directed. Or actually it was pre-op, not post-op, sorry. And an unless otherwise directed form was filed on the platoon level, and it would tell the grid coordinates, where they were going, what they were doing, the objectives at the target area, blah, blah, blah. You had to go down, I mean, pretty much lay out, here's our op, and submit it up the chain of command. Well, Mike said, you know, everybody knew there were leaks all the way to Saigon. So when paperwork was pushed, you're basically announcing, I mean, you know, we had ARVN troops that were compromised. There were all kinds of issues. So when you submitted one of those forms, you basically just punched the ticket on what we're doing and where we're going and why.
Right.
So he said, what we learned to do was submit this material with vague, like they would give the grid coordinates, but it would be so large that you wouldn't know specifically where they were going to be.
Right.
That you'd have to put a time zone of when they were going to hit. So they'd leave it open for 3 days. So you don't know when you're going to hit in there. And he said, once they started doing that and kind of fuzzying these forms, the ambushes dropped off, and they were a lot more safe to do this and that and the other. That to me is playing it kind of smart on one level, because if, you know, I mean, you're just kind of, you know, you're trying to do the mission that you're asked to do without, you know, without compromising the specifics. So that bled over into our culture. Like, screw the rules. We don't like to wear uniforms. We don't like to polish our boots. We don't like to do stuff that we viewed as just military BS.
Mm-hmm.
We do our job. And getting into the detail, you mentioned the detail side of things. when I heard it, I thought, there's something to that, because the kind of detail we hate is paperwork and petty bullshit and doing this stuff that just drives us all nuts. But when it came to like focusing on the job, we were really super dialed in, to details on that level. And the last thing I'll say, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts were there, is like, yeah, that Army school we showed up at, Bruce and I, we, we were full suntan. We were in shorts and flip flops. I mean, that's our operating gear in San Diego, right?
Right.
We pull up in a white Lincoln Continental. We got upgraded. They didn't usually rent us those cars. But we pulled up, and all the Green Berets and a few Rangers are in the back of this deuce and a half, like shit, sitting there in their, high and tights or whatever, and their gear. And we get out and we're like, hey, is this Sodic? And they're like looking at us like, what planet did you guys come from? So, and it was a constant thing even in that school, because we had longer hair. I mean, we had relaxed grooming standards. And I mean, even the Army instructors, and these were Green Beret instructors, and they're like, I remember one time they told Bruce, why don't you get a haircut? And he said something like, if I wanted a haircut, I would have joined the Army, man. And I mean, like, there's always this pushback. So
Right.
yeah, we always had this kind of disdain for the rigid rules of the military. I don't know, on some level.
And that's built in. And you, this was something taught. This was not something overtly taught to you. Like, there wasn't a class in Buds called "Screw the Navy, screw the Department of Defense. We do what we want." It was just sort of when you got. And did any of that come up in your training in Buds, in your pipeline, or would you say it's once you hit your team, once you hit your platoon or your team, that's when you really understood
Yeah.
this is the way we operate?
Yeah, I don't remember any of that in training, in formal training. I think it all seeped in when you started to rub shoulders with older experienced SEALs at the unit, in your unit level. Yeah. Which is also something that this book, Dick Couch's book, A Tactical Ethic, gets into, that he's identifying some of the problems of atrocities, war crimes, this whole stuff that we're talking about, that Code Over a Country, the main book, is dealing with. And he said he sees a lot of the problems happening on the unit level. And one of those problems, and you can probably understand this even, albeit you don't come from a SEAL background, but in a unit, man, in unit cohesion, one of the unforgivable sins is to like blow the whistle on your brother, right?
Right.
You don't go there, man. You're in a blood pact, in essence. I mean, you'll die for your brother, and your brother will die for you, and that's an understood thing, and that's why we fight hard for one another. So the trouble is, when you have one or two bad apples who start pushing the lines of the ethical lines, then it becomes very difficult to really, like, where do you go with that? Are you going to be that guy who's going to go squealing to the upper brass, who there's a collective disdain for anyway, because they're always throwing stuff down our throats that we don't need, don't let us do our job, micromanage? So I thought that was a really astute point that he brought out, that, man, when stuff starts to happen in an operational unit, especially with senior enlisted or even junior officers, if they're winking at stuff, it becomes, and that was that book, Alpha, the story of Eddie Gallagher. Boy, that was the whole battle within their platoon, because in my opinion, if the facts are what I think they are from multiple sources, including that book, Gallagher was way over the line on a lot of things. I don't judge the man. I don't know him, but the half of the, well, not half, but a good chunk of the platoon was like, we do not want to operate with this guy. We do not want to go there. But it was really difficult because he was a chief of the platoon.
Right.
He had the platoon commander kind of in his pocket, and boy, that sets up a really, really difficult situation. So
I mean, that's an interesting point, and that's a thought I had reading this book, Country Over Code, Code Over Country,
put
Code
over
Over
country.
Country, which was, when I read that, I thought to myself, I'll say, let me not lose my train of thought. What I thought was, what they're describing in terms of how, the loyalty to one another, the loyalty to the unit, this urge to look out for one another, which can very easily slip into covering up
Mhm.
wrongdoing. You know, um, I thought to myself, man, that is any unit in the
Mhm.
military. Period.
Right.
That is not something unique to the SEAL teams at all. It's in the Ranger Regiment. It's in the Special Forces groups. It's everywhere. It's in a chemical company in the Army National Guard. It's
Sure.
that it's that sort of self preservation. It's a unique environment where there's a strict hierarchy based off rank, where authority is nearly absolute, right? Where
Yeah.
the stakes are so high, in the right times, wartime environments or dangerous training, whatever, what have you. And I just thought to myself, like, this story plays out the same in that chemical company as it does in a SEAL team.
Right.
You have, officers who are in charge, senior enlisted, whose job is to manage the folks. And to your point, there is supposed to be built in a military unit, there's supposed to be built in loyalty and cohesion. And when you do get those folks who cross the line, um, those folks are taking advantage of that, right? They're actually betraying that loyalty and that trust and
Mhm.
that camaraderie, and they put everyone in these awkward positions. And if you're looking out for your pal, swim buddy, ranger buddy, whatever, for small things, it is hard,
Mhm.
when there are morally ethically questionable things that happen. It's hard to know when someone has crossed that line and then what you do about it. And
Right.
the I've seen it everywhere. The urge is to take care of it in house, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're in a platoon, a company, or whatever, I mean, it's its own world.
Yeah.
Nothing exists outside of it,
That's
you
right.
know? And so, and the authorities are there. You have a platoon leader
Mhm.
who's in charge, or a platoon sergeant, or troop chief, or whatever it is. Like, they're in charge. That is their world. And so it doesn't seem all that strange that, okay, well, we're going to take care of it in house. And
Right.
they're going to do what they're going to do to handle this. So that was one big thought, which was like, this could be any unit in the military, first off. So you can't fault the SEAL teams for that type of environment. Um,
Yeah. It gets complicated too, exactly, extending what you're saying. When you start thinking about, and this is where the higher brass comes into it,
right.
media relations. Um, we have we have an image, we have a brand, right? I mean, and
Mhm.
that's what it is. We don't want to. We'd rather suppress or handle it, put a you know cap on this than have it get out there. And it was bizarre because I mean, a few years ago when that Green Beret was killed by these Navy SEALs who were hazing him
Mhm.
in Mali, I believe it was. I remember hearing about it, and then it went away. I'm like, whatever happened? And I kept thinking, what was that story? Something was up. I mean, something clearly was weird about that. And sure enough, these guys are in prison now.
Yeah.
And I never heard. I don't know how they put I mean, I guess there were certain news outlets that got it out. It came out in the book, but boy, I didn't hear it on the CBS Evening News or anything like that. I mean, it was so there's that whole angle that the higher brass doesn't want their command to look tarnished or corrupt. So
Right, because they're the caretakers, right? Nobody wants to be the person on duty when everything goes to crap, you know. Nobody wants to. So they keep they keep it looking clean, and
Mhm.
then they hand it over, and the next person's like, "Oh, man, this is a
Yeah.
mess."
Yeah.
And and it's just hot potato. It's just a
Yeah.
game of hot potato.
Right.
Um, going back, going back to, one thing I wanna say, when we're talking about how, the teams might be perceived as undisciplined, um, and then you described how I think the best way to describe how you explained it was this idea, this, at this idea of adaptation, right?
Mhm.
Like being free and flexible to make the decisions that'll result in the success of the mission. Um, and I think that that's valuable. I think that there is value in even just that that attitude in general. The showing up to Sodic in board shorts and flip flops and your long flowing locks. There had to have been, I mean, you can't tell me that you didn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that you weren't like, okay, yeah, it wasn't a reinforcement that you were special,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
guys have it in your name, Navy Special Warfare. So,
Yeah.
but but
Yeah.
there's some validation there, and I think that there's some value to that. I always say, the difference between when units from special operations go out versus perhaps a conventional unit is all in the mindset. It's many different things. Sometimes it's oftentimes it's equipment and how you get there, but it's 100% mindset is a difference.
Yeah.
You know, like going out on target and feeling like you're the most dangerous people out there that night. That you are the people to be feared. That's a huge advantage in the fight. And so I don't necessarily think it's a problem that, well, it when if regulated, I don't think it's a problem to have special people allow them to feel special.
Mhm.
Um, in certain respects. Another thing I wanted to say was that, also that type of working sort of attitude, I think, is also similar. I don't know. I didn't work with special forces, the Army Green Berets, uh, often. I think on one occasion there was a CIF, a Commanders in Extremis force that was with us in one location very briefly, but we didn't interact all that much. But my understanding is the attitude is very similar to what you described
Yeah.
in the SEAL teams, and of course, the two of them. I think you explained in a previous episode how they kind of became official and came up at the
Mhm.
same time. Uh,
Yeah.
so so that attitude, and just by their missions, being out there by themselves, again, needing to adapt, not being out on their own, maybe not even
Right.
not having a big hierarchical structure bearing down on them needing to be independent
Right.
and to operate in the way they saw fit. So my understanding is they operate pretty similarly,
Mhm.
um, with a similar disdain for sort of conventional military customs, courtesies, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call them.
Yeah.
So, but the rank. Well, go ahead. You're about to say something.
Well, just to add just a kind of rejoinder that I think that's right on. I got that sense working with special forces, and I spent months working with those guys side to side, both on the instructional level as instructors who are special forces and special forces peers who were going through the same training. And many, how the school that's several months long, how many times do we just sit around and spitball and talk and
Right.
ask questions and joke around? I mean, that's where you learn a lot of stuff. Um, and the thing I think we had in common more than anything else was and this was maybe pedagogical or built into the curriculum. Always ask questions, like always think outside the box. Don't ever get locked into an either or situation, either or being either it's this way or it's that way. Maybe there's a third way or a fourth way or a fifth way to solve this problem. Let's not get our heads locked into some like we're just going to charge the machine gun nest. That's the way it's like, no, man, there's maybe a way better way to do this. So so in the SEALs and special forces tended to do this. Like always thinking maybe there's a better angle on this. Maybe we can refine this this hell ambush. Like so there was an open-mindedness, and I saw with those guys, like what I saw with the SEAL, like here's a pop cultural kind of analysis. Like what I noticed with SEAL instructors, and I was paying close attention to their every move, especially the ones I respected. In the Marines, maybe in the regular Army infantry, in the more conventional type forces, line and file forces, there would be, flag waving, Republican, country music, yeehaw. This is, and that's fine. I mean, that's all that's good. In the groups I worked with, both special forces and SEALs, it was alternative thinking, listening to the Violent Femmes, Depeche Mode, all of this alternative music. To some of it, that I dug with from high school, but it was like these guys are not. They're not the flag waving, rootin' tootin', shooting cowboy types. They're more, and though they may be cowboy in the sense that they're kind of renegade, but not the stereotypical American pie Chevrolet kind of thinking. It was more outside the box, more, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Critical thinking.
I could see that. I think I know from what I know about special forces selection is that they are looking for folks who think that way, who
Mhm,
operate that way. Um, you know, compare that to the Ranger Regiment.
mhm,
The Ranger Regiment is ha, is and has always been, based off of a conventional infantry company,
yeah.
right? So and battalion and then the regiment. Um,
Hmm,
it's undergone a lot of changes over time in general, and then over the last 20 years for sure.
yeah. Yeah.
And then culturally, it's the exact opposite.
Mhm,
Culturally, it always up to my time. That's the caveat. That's the disclaimer. Up to my time, what I can speak to. So 2010, but um, it was very much focused on standards. You know,
mhm,
um, having the standards with you, knowing what the standards were, being quizzed on the
mhm,
standards, and then when failing to meet a standard, just being hammered,
mhm,
just being absolutely hammered. Um, when new guys, you're talking about when you showed up or when you spent some time with a in a team while you were in training, you kind of got their vibe. A trainee, a candidate, spending any time with a ranger company or a ranger platoon would be like, "Dear Lord, this is scarier than training. The way
right,
these guys
right,
treat their new guys." I
right.
mean, it was like, you know, that's the whole when you first show up as a private, in a ranger company, you know, your life is miserable because you were being crushed on the standards, knowing what the standards are and whatnot. So it is very much about uniformity.
Mhm,
In the old days, I think it was like pre 2001, so pre 9/11, like they did the high and tight thing. That was the standard. That's what they were known. That's what the Ranger Regiment was
mhm,
known for. Everybody's a runner. Everybody's everything. Um, so that was just kind of the image, and that's what when the Ranger Regiment was founded. It was founded in like the I think it was 83. This is where I would get crushed because I don't remember the exact day. The exact day. I believe it was October '83 when the Ranger Regiment was formed officially of the three
yeah.
battalions. Before that, there were two separate Ranger battalions. But um, when it was formed, it was at a time after Vietnam, and and in the transition years where there was a lot of discipline issues in the military overall, but definitely in the army, right? And there wasn't a lot
Yeah.
of combat action.
Gotcha.
And when the Ranger Regiment was formed, it was formed in part to serve as sort of a beacon, a standard for the rest of the army to aspire to.
Interesting.
So, there was a combat role for the Ranger Regiment, which was part of this thing called Airland Battle, which was like this big thing in the 80s where they decided, okay, here's how we're going to sort of do, here's how the United States is going to tackle wars going forward. And the Ranger Regiment was to be like the the sledgehammer, the
Yeah.
commando force that takes the airfields, that takes the dams, that takes these large objectives and just crushes folks right out of the gate. So that was the idea, but it was also to serve to the rest of the military to say, hey, all the drugs that's going on, all the discipline issues, all that stuff that came from the army post Vietnam, like it doesn't have to be this way, and you all
Yeah.
should work to be this way. To the point where even it's kind of built into the Ranger Regiment sort of structure where Rangers are supposed to go out to the conventional army and spend some time there. So,
Hmm.
like, for instance, the officers, for sure, this is where it shows. You cannot be a Ranger platoon leader until you've been a platoon leader somewhere else and
Hmm.
then been successful. So we don't get platoon leaders who have absolutely no experience. They're not O1s or O2s. The platoon leaders in the range, again, in my time, the platoon leaders in the Ranger, they're captains already. They're O3s. That's a platoon
Yeah.
leader in the Ranger Regiment. And then guess
Right.
what? When they're done with their PL time, if they want the company, they're supposed to go somewhere else. Now, again, when I was in, there was a couple wars going on, so you could hide a really good guy away somewhere in an ass shop and then bring
Hmm.
and then bring him in. But
Right.
theoretically, he's supposed to go take a company somewhere in the 82nd, be a top performing company commander, and then come back. And then he's a major when he comes back. So
Right.
so all the officer billets in the Ranger Regiment are already like one up, right? And then the same was supposed to go for the enlisted folks as well. But as whenever Special Operations Command got stood up, whenever these wars kicked off in the GWAT, and then it
Yeah.
became and as honestly, and we'll get to it at some point, but we'll talk about how like the Ranger Regiment has been like a lot of the SEAL teams and of CAG and the Green Berets, all the other special operations units that the Ranger Regiment had been working with and alongside, it rubbed off and it changed. It changed a
Mhm.
lot from when I was there to when I left as well. So, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I did want to sort of juxtapose the two differences, right? Like a
Yeah.
ranger reporting in would check to see what the uniform is supposed to be. Like
Yeah.
they'd be, you'd have your tan beret looking good, have all your
Yeah.
stuff on your pen and paper, um, in general. But
Yeah.
but I will say over time, I saw I saw a difference. I
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
Rangers being aware that, hey, why is it we work regularly with Dev Group, with CAG, with these other folks, and they don't act this way. So why should we act
Yeah.
this way? We're special too. I saw the
Right.
specialness rub off and change things. I'm not saying for the worse.
Right.
I think, like I said, I think there's value in that, but it's definitely different from when I first got there and different from the stories I heard from the guys who were there before the global
Yeah.
war on terror even kicked off.
I could give you just a humorous. I don't know how our time's looking, but a humorous anecdote. This
Go for it.
happened. I was there, SEAL Team 5. I was in my last platoon. Um, so uh, it was golf platoon, and our chief Mike Bailey, my hero. Everybody, okay, this is an example of something that would never in a million years happen in a ranger muster. I guarantee it. So every morning, for those of you, if you're non-military, you have muster. Morning muster is like, that's what we called it, where you all present and accounted for. You report to up the chain of command, and if somebody's absent, you give a reason why. And so every man is accounted for, every soldier at the command. And so around the team area, our uniform of the day, like kit, seriously, were UDT, these tan UDT shorts and green t-shirts and tennis shoes or boots. You could wear boots. Um, Most people wore tennis shoes because it's San Diego, it's warm, it's summertime on the beach. And then we'd wear whatever cover we wanted. Like we would have platoons would have their own cover. So we'd get these customized cool guy covers, like
And you mean like a
Golf
ball? You mean like a ball cap?
ball cap.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, uh yeah, just like a baseball cap that, and we would go and get them all made with a patch like golf platoon, whatever. And some guys would just wear any old hat. Like you had SEAL Team 5 hat covers, like ball caps. You're supposed Okay, so the uniform of the day is as much of a joke as that is in and of itself, was khaki shorts, boots, jungle boots, back in when we had jungle boots, dive socks, and a green t-shirt, and a starched military cover, like the 8 point or whatever, you put them in,
Nice.
starch them. Okay, you that with your rank insignia on it. That was the uniform of the day, and you were supposed to be in that. Well, guys are just wearing any old thing, and they just come out of there. They wouldn't even be. They'd be rocking their Asics running shoes, and they would just grab any old hat out. It got to where the guys were grabbing any cover. It didn't even matter if it was a SEAL team logo cover. It was just, and Mike got so, because he really took pride in, like, he wanted to be in the uniform of the day, and so he's like, "What's the deal? Where's the standards here? Who wears? Are we just wearing anything?" And guys were like, "Oh no," there was no logical answer to it. So one morning, he decided, all right, I'm going to make a statement in front of the commanding officer. I mean, so like everybody's out there. There's OPSO, the executive officer, the CO, and Mike. I couldn't believe it. And he is about one of the only guys that had the chops to do this, because I mean, highly decorated, Purple Heart, Vietnam. I mean, what are you going to do to this guy? I mean, he's a senior chief. He made master chief, so he's not really that worried about making rank anymore. He comes out. I don't know where he got this hat. It was a quad colored hat, like yellow, green, blue, and orange, and it had a propeller. It had a, like, one of those goofy. It had a propeller on the top, and he's just standing there. And to illustrate the absurdity of there's no cover standards, and then, like, immediately he gets singled out because, like, somebody sees him, like, the brass are like, "Bailey, fall out after the muster's over." He's like, "Hoo-yah." And he was like, his point was like, and it was like the executive officer called him aside. He's like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "What do you mean, what am I doing? What's anybody doing out here? There's 20 different covers." And he was making a point, but like, that's kind of a good little funny anecdote of how, man, everybody they just winged it when it came to the uniform standards, even salutes. We would like there was this kind of thing where if you'd see an officer coming on the Coronado base, if it was a black shoe, which meant regular Navy officer, which you should salute. I mean, that's the way it should be. And I didn't really necessarily fall into this, but I knew guys that would go out of their way to just like get distance so they didn't have to salute an officer who's not a SEAL, right? So it was definitely there, the disdain for, I don't know, military bearing, military standards.
We'll see what that translates into. What do you think? Do you think we got I think we got some more we can talk about standard. I think I got a couple of anecdotes. We can talk about this a little bit more. We'll end this one though, and we'll pick it back up here in a second, or for you all in the next one. So thanks for checking us out, Operator Syndrome. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.